Okay, so thanks Shamriddhi for this opportunity for this presenting this work. So I'm going to be talking about hydraulic jumps. I started working on hydraulic jumps during my PhD and I have been interested in this problem for a long time now. We recently have got some results and I'll show you that there are certain aspects of this problem which one can understand by thinking about nonlinear waves. Okay, so hydraulic jumps is something which has a strong connection to nonlinear waves. This is a laminar flow problem, but you will see, I hope to convince you that there are some interesting puzzles even in laminar flows. So this was work with Rama and Gaurav. Okay, so I believe most of you are already familiar with what is a hydraulic jump, but just to recap. So I am not going to be talking on how does a hydraulic jump form or why a hydraulic jump forms per se, but I am going to be focused on something called undulations that happen in the context of hydraulic jumps. But I would just like to go through some background which is necessary to understand what we really did. Okay, so one of the easiest ways in which you can see a hydraulic jump is in your kitchen sink. You just have some kind of a tap, a plate below it, and you have a jet of water which falls. This is all laminar flow, the Reynolds number is sufficiently low, and what you would see is this circular rim kind of a thing. This is an almost abrupt change in the film thickness over a very small distance. Okay. So if you look at it sideways, you will find that the film thickness almost abruptly changes over a very small distance. This is what is known as, it's circular because this happens in a radial geometry. Now it turns out that hydraulic jumps come in various flavors. Yeah, okay. So so you want me to speak slowly? Okay. So it turns out that hydraulic jumps come in various flavors. Okay. So this was the first person, to the best of my knowledge, who kind of brought hydraulic jumps to attention in literature. It was Lord Rayleigh who kind of first brought circular hydraulic jumps to attention in the literature. Now hydraulic jumps can happen in various geometries. Specifically, there are these one kind of hydraulic jumps which happen in the context of rivers. Yes. So this is a steady flow problem. So yes, so this is a laminar steady flow. Okay, so so there are these class of hydraulic jumps which are known as tidal bores. Typically they occur in rivers where the conditions are turbulent, but you can reproduce some of these things in the lab under laminar conditions. Okay, so I'll tell you what is the observation. So basically there are certain rivers in the world which under certain conditions there is a tidal wave which enters the river and it propagates as a near vertical wall of water many kilometers upstream into the river. Okay, so there are very specific conditions which need to be satisfied in order for this to happen. This does not happen in every river which empties into the ocean. Okay, now this is a turbulent bore, and the basic idea was that this is like a hydraulic jump. This is called travelling because it actually travels with respect to the lap frame, but the basic idea was that if you made a Galilean transformation and went to the frame in which this was stationary, then this would be an equivalent problem compared to the standing jump that I just showed you. Okay. Now what is also observed, and this is what I am going to be talking about, is that in case of these travelling jumps, you frequently sometimes see, especially in rivers, these undulatory patterns which appear behind the jumps. Okay. Now I am going to argue something about these patterns, and I am going to show you that how one can understand these patterns in terms of a nonlinear wave phenomena. Interestingly, this was tidal bores found mentioned in the literature even before Lord Rayleigh, so it seems that Leonardo da Vinci knew about them way back, and he had already spoken about it in the 16th century. Okay, so as I told you, it's possible to create these travelling jumps in the laboratory. So what you have to do is a very simple experiment. You take a channel, you have water on both sides, you put a vertical wall and you just remove, and there are two levels of water on both sides, and you just pull out the partition. Okay. If you do that, what you will get is a near vertical wall of water which will propagate from left to right depending on which side is higher and which side is lower. And you can show using very simple inviscid arguments that this nonlinear wave, it's nonlinear. I'll argue why is this nonlinear later. This propagates with this velocity. Okay. H1, H2 are the heights. Okay. So Okay. And these are standing jumps. This I have already shown to you earlier. You can get similar standing jumps even in when I say standing, it's standing with respect to the lab frame. So you can get standing jumps even in the case of channels. Okay. So you have a planar channel where you have a flow of water and this is the jump. Okay. Even this can be made laminar under rather easy conditions. Okay, so just to recap some very basic aspects of hydraulic jumps and their connection with waves. So I have just put a slide on irrotational surface gravity waves, and it's important because this is what gives us some of the basic ideas about how to understand hydraulic jumps. Okay, so just imagine that there is a layer of fluid which is undisturbed. You perturb it and you create surface gravity waves. Now there are two parameters in the problem. One is an amplitude parameter which measures how tall is the wave compared to the wavelength, and there is a depth parameter which says how long is the wave compared to the depth. Okay. Now most of the equations in wave literature that you will find are actually arrived at by playing around with the relative sizes of these two parameters. Okay. Now if you look at small amplitude linearized surface gravity waves, it's easy to show it's easy to show that small amplitude surface gravity waves satisfy this dispersion relation. Okay, this relates the frequency to the wavelength of the wave, and one can derive this result exactly. Okay, now specifically if you look at the limit of this dispersion relation for long waves, so you are looking at tan hyperbolic of this object. For by long I mean lambda is large compared to the undisturbed depth h0. So tan hyperbolic of x for small x. Okay, in that limit the dispersion relation, the leading order term becomes this, and you can show that all long waves, all small amplitude long waves travel with one speed, and that is this. Okay. In general surface gravity waves are not all wavelengths do not travel at the same speed, it is a dispersive system, but sufficiently long waves makes it non-dispersive, and so you get a characteristic velocity scale which is like gh0, which depends only on the undisturbed conditions. And it is this scale which introduced the idea of a hydraulic jump as a shock. Okay. So the basic idea was again introduced by Lord Rayleigh himself. So he came up with this idea that what you see in the kitchen sink is really a shock. There is a velocity scale root gh0 with which waves travel, and just as we have shocks in compressible flows when you have a transition from flow speed greater than the speed of sound to flow speed less than the speed of sound, here the equivalent speed of sound is the root gh0, which is the long wave speed. Okay. And just as you can define a Mach number in the case of compressible flow, and the shock is a transition from Mach greater than 1 to Mach less than 1, this is you can define an analogous Froude number, which is the ratio of the average flow speed to the wave speed, which I just showed you. So the average wave speed would be root gh1 here. If you just ignore the spatial variations of the film thickness, and as a zeroth order approximation model the jump as a jump in height from one film thickness to another film thickness, the basic idea is that this represents a transition just like a shock in Froude number from Froude greater than 1 to Froude less than 1. Okay, so this is a region where you all your waves are traveling downstream because the flow speed is greater than the sound speed, and this is a region where upstream propagation of waves is possible. Okay. Now what Rayleigh also took this, I mean his calculations are rather simple but they have some insight in it. So he also took this further, and he kind of said that okay, if I am going to think of the hydraulic jump as a discontinuity, then you can actually show that for an inviscid irrotational flow you can define a mass flux, an energy flux and a momentum flux, and you can show that for an inviscid irrotational flow, unless you have a discontinuity like this somewhere in the flow, these quantities are all continuous everywhere in the flow. If you however have a discontinuity, then mass is obviously, he also derived this relation which I will talk about later, but he showed that mass is obviously continuous because you can't have a loss of mass. If you insist on making momentum continuous, then energy becomes discontinuous across the jump. Okay, so what's coming in is not what's going out in terms of energy. Now this will be crucial. I would request you to remember these three symbols: mass, energy and momentum, because I am going to come to them later in the context of undular jumps. Okay. This is basically the basic idea which kind of helps us to understand why do you have these undulations when you have travelling jumps. Okay. So as I told you, under certain conditions, when you have these travelling boards in reverse, there are undulations behind them. Now there are some distinctive features of these undulations. The first feature is the number of undulations behind the front is typically proportional to the amount of time that the front has been in existence. The second thing, which is not very clear here but is rather clear here, this is a picture taken and I have taken from the internet. This is apparently somewhere sometime during the Second World War in some ocean, okay, around England. So you can immediately see that the scale for the crests and the scale for the troughs are very different. The troughs are these. The troughs are very flat compared to the crests, which are very sharp. Okay. So later when I show you simulations, you will see a similar feature appearing in our simulations also. And this is a picture of an undular jump in a channel, a standing undular jump. Okay. Now one of the things that people have done until now is they have found undular jumps, they have found under certain conditions that you can have undulations even behind standing jumps. People have made streamline measurements of these flows and they have reported that they have reported a very obvious kind of a streamline structure. Okay. Now the typical condition under which these experiments get reported are conditions under which there is a growing, because of the presence of this wall, there is a growing boundary layer, and the thickness of this boundary layer is very small compared to the depth of this fluid. So to a zeroth order approximation, you can model this flow in typical experimental situations as an inviscid flow. Okay, you can ignore the fact that there is a boundary layer here. Now what we were interested in is hydraulic jumps which form on thin film flows. By thin film I mean films whose thickness is comparable to the thickness of the boundary layer. So by definition, in such thin film flows, the boundary layer is of the same order of magnitude as the film thickness, and so even if you are allowed to think of this as a wave problem, these waves are necessarily viscous waves, okay, because the viscosity is important everywhere in the flow. So if we just go back to the experiments on channels, where I told you the typical situation where people report experiments where the boundary layer is a very thin fraction of the entire film. The typical conditions which are reported, remember fluid is the speed, is the ratio of the flow speed, the average flow speed to the wave speed. So the typical conditions that are reported, that have been reported in literature way back from the 50s, is that and in this regime of fluid number, here fluid 1 is defined somewhere here. So fluid is a local quantity here, it varies with streamwise distance. So under these conditions you get undulations. If you increase the fluid number any further, then you do not get undulations, okay. And there are no surprises as far as the streamline patterns are concerned. You will just, if you just plot the streamlines here, you will just get an undulatory streamline pattern. Sorry? Okay, so the difference is that this is undulatory. If you increase the fluid number, this front gets unstable and it starts breaking, and if you increase it any further, this front starts becoming unstable, but the undulations kind of vanish altogether. Okay, so I will show you that in our Navier-Stokes simulations, where we also get similar patterns, there are two things. First of all, we do get undulations, and I will show you that although the problem is viscous in the sense that the streamline patterns are not what people have observed here. Okay, so we indeed get new streamlines which convinces us that the flow is viscous. Okay, yet one can understand these waves that appear on top of these viscous flows using reasonably inviscid arguments. Okay, so now before I get into that, let me just quickly go through what was the existing understanding of why these undulations happen on inviscid flows. Okay, so the basic idea came from these two people in a very seminal paper sometime around 1953. This is James Lighthill, who was a very distinguished fluid dynamicist, and he they came up with a lot of very interesting ideas. Okay, so one of the first things they said was that look, Rayleigh told us that if you model the jump as a discontinuity, the energy flux is discontinuous. I showed that to you earlier. So what is coming in is not equal to what is going out. So they argued that one of the ways of getting rid of this excess energy, if you do not want to invoke turbulent arguments, was to just distort the free surface. Okay, so this is a stationary free surface, and anything which is not horizontal has a higher potential energy just because of the distortion. It is a gravitational potential energy. Okay, so the basic argument was that these undulations appear as a mechanism for storing the excess energy which cannot be got rid of the energy difference between what's coming in and what's going out goes into distorting the interface. Okay. Now they went quite further than this. They also argued that these undulations that you see typically behind jumps are not linear waves. Okay. They are in principle, they are actually governed by this equation. This is a very famous equation which has a lot of literature. This is what is known as the KdV equation, the Korteweg-de Vries equation. And there were quite a few important insights that they had in their paper. The first thing was that they said that these undulations would be modeled by this equation. Here h is the film thickness, x is the streamwise distance, and note that they also showed that the coefficients of this part would be the same r, s and q that I showed you earlier. Q is the mass flux, r is the energy flux, s is the momentum flux. Okay. Now another crucial insight that they gave was that okay, so before that, if you think of this equation as a differential equation, you can of course solve it. Okay. Now you can solve this in terms of elliptic functions. This is a nonlinear differential equation, you can solve it in terms of the Jacobian elliptic functions. Now what Lighthill and Benjamin showed was that you can think of this as the equation of a oscillator. Think of this as a kinetic energy term, think of this as a potential energy term. Now this is not a harmonic oscillator because the potential energy is not quadratic in its degree of freedom. So the solution of this is not going to be a sine or a cosine, but it is going to be the generalization of that, which are the Jacobian elliptic functions. Okay. So that is where the nonlinearity comes from. This is actually a nonlinear equation, and you can remember I showed you in one of my earlier slides that there are two small parameters, one of which measures the wave, how long are the waves compared to the depth, and the other measures how tall are the waves compared to the wavelength. So one can derive this equation consistently using perturbative arguments. Okay. So what Benjamin and Lighthill showed was that since you can think of this as this equation as the energy equation of a non-harmonic oscillator, of an anharmonic oscillator, whether you are going to get oscillations, and this time since the independent variable is not time but space, these would be oscillations in space. And since this is a cubic in H, the roots of this cubic would determine whether you can or you cannot get oscillatory solutions. Remember I showed you a picture where depending on the Froude number you have undulations. As you increase the Froude number, the front gets unstable. If you increase the Froude number even further, the undulations vanish altogether. Okay. So they were kind of able to explain some of these things using this simple model. Okay. So this is the point where we came in and we did Navier-Stokes simulations of jumps where the boundary layer is not a small fraction of the depth. Okay. So by definition viscosity cannot be neglected. So in Benjamin Lighthill's equation there is no viscosity anywhere, the whole argument is an inviscid argument. Okay. And we did these, so the question is what happens to these, we know that we do get jumps when we have a flow which is still viscous. But what happens, do we get undulations and things like that when there is vorticity everywhere in the flow? So what I am going to, so I am going to show you a movie now, and the simulation that we have done is a reasonably simple simulation. So this is our geometry. Okay. This is a wall, this is a multiphase flow solver, so it solves for both air and water. We choose fluids with properties like air and water. We inject fluid, and the only thing that we ensure, I mean observe that we are not perturbing the domain anywhere and things like that. Okay. So it is a flat plate, water comes out, we will inject water here, it will just flow over this domain and fall through this part under the influence of gravity. And you will see a jump forming first, then you will see that as the jump forms you will see that undulatory patterns start appearing one by one. You will also notice that these undulatory patterns have crests which are sharper than the troughs will be flatter, the crest will be sharper, in line with what I showed you earlier. Just to understand, you are injecting in water from the left side. So is there surface tension which in the analysis there was no mention of surface? Yes, so there is a very small amount of surface tension in these simulations just to keep things stable, because sometimes the waves break and that kills off the simulation, but in this simulation surface tension is not important. I'll come back to surface tension. See, the thing is, I am not sure whether that analogy works or not, because you have to do something very specific here. So you will not get a hydraulic jump and everything what I show you unless you take care of the inlet. So unless you inject fluid under very specific conditions at the inlet, you will not get a hydraulic jump. So by specific conditions, I mean you have to make sure that the Froude number, and remember the Froude number is a local quantity. So you have to inject fluid with a Froude number which is greater than 1, okay, and has sufficient distance in the domain to go through 1 somewhere inside the domain, okay. So if you, for example, inject fluid with Froude number less than 1, you are going to see none of these things. So okay, so let me show you the movie first. So hope this will work. So you see that thickening of the, so you will see the jump first forming. So it is falling down. This part is very thin because there is an acceleration here. Okay, so do you see those small protuberances? So the jump has already formed, and now see these things. And they will travel upstream, and at some point you will see that the crests are very sharp, the troughs are very flat. So you can already see that here. Okay, so they are very pointed crests. Yeah, see that. Now up to here, if you do not really probe the flow any further, it looks like an inviscid problem, okay, and there seems to be no surprises here, okay. Now when we wanted to find out what are the streamline patterns like, that is when we landed in a surprise, and that is what the streamline patterns look like, okay. Now what is happening here is that there are these recirculation bubbles which have developed under each crest, okay. Now it is well known from boundary layer theory that these separated bubbles are actually a viscous effect, okay, which arises from the separation of the boundary layer. Now remember, our conditions are such that you have there is a developing boundary layer, and the boundary layer reaches the thickness of the boundary layer is growing with space, and the boundary layer reaches the free surface well before anything happens, okay. So this is a flow where viscosity is important everywhere, okay, yet you seem to get undulations which seem to agree with the inviscid calculations of Benjamin and Lighthill. However, they seem to be sitting on a flow which is completely different from what is seen in typical channels, okay. Now what I am going to show you is that we can still understand, this is a very funny situation because I will show you that one can understand these nonlinear waves using the same formalism of Benjamin and Lighthill, okay. So what I will show you is there is a parameter which contains information about whether there will be undulations or not, okay. The idea is basically the same as Benjamin and Lighthill, but generalized to these kind of flows. This has not yet been detected in experiments. Yes. Yes.
That will be an effect for stabilization of this.
Yes. 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 And I mean, in any experiment, there will always be 3D effects because of the presence of confining walls and things like that. Okay. So this is the regular. So there is an outflow boundary condition here, and this I think, yeah, this is an inlet. So there is air. So we inject only fluid. This kind of drags in air here, and that's a wall. That's a wall. It's a no slip boundary condition. So it's a usual no slip surface. There is a small amount of surface tension in this simulation, but that's just to, so you can in principle look at Weber number going to infinity, Weber being inverse of surface tension, and there will be no qualitative change in this picture, okay. So I will talk briefly about what happens when you go to the other limit, Weber going to 0, when surface tension becomes as important as gravity. No, because even in quasi, no, it would be the other way around, because the side walls will make it even worse. So you would want. Okay, so this is what the streamline pattern looks like, and again, once again, this is a laminar steady flow. Okay, so it's not unsteady. Once these patterns have formed, they just stay there. Okay. Now comes the interesting part. So it seems that there is an effect of viscosity on these patterns. It also seems that there is an effect of gravity. So think of fluid. Remember, fluid is like inverse gravity. Reynolds is like inverse viscosity. So here what I plotted is keeping Reynolds fixed. If I vary fluid, what happens to these undulatory patterns? Here the other way around, keeping fluid fixed. If you vary Reynolds, what happens to these undulatory patterns? Okay. So it seems that if you decrease the fluid number, these undulations become more and more pronounced. The jump moves upstream. The jump in some sense becomes steeper. Okay. If you increase the fluid number, the jump moves downstream, and the amplitude of the undulations really become very gentle. A similar thing you can see here in the case of Reynolds number also. If you go lower in Reynolds number, the amplitude becomes very large. What you see around here is a wave breaking. Okay. So this part of the flow actually didn't reach the steady state. Okay. So the wave kept toppling over and breaking and things like that. Okay. Okay. So one of the first things we wanted to do was how relevant is an inviscid calculation in understanding these undulations. Okay. So remember, there is a prediction by Rayleigh which says that if you think of if you model the jump as a discontinuity, it's a jump from h2 by h1 over 0 distance, then there is this relation which was derived by Rayleigh which says h2 by h1 is related to the upstream fluid number. Okay. So we found that Rayleigh's, we gave it upstream conditions and we asked it to predict the downstream height, thinking of this as a jump discontinuity. Okay. So it seems that for mild undulations, Rayleigh's prediction works quite well. Okay. So this is the first hint that despite the fact that this might be a viscous flow, an inviscid calculation might still work, at least for understanding these undulations. When you have strong undulations with separated bubbles below, the prediction does not work so well. Okay. So we again gave it upstream conditions and asked it to predict the downstream height. Okay. And it does a reasonably fair job. It's not as good as what it was earlier, but this is what it predicts. Okay. Now we turn to Benjamin Lighthill's equation, and the basic idea was that see, we have a viscous flow, and unlike Benjamin and Lighthill's argument, this is the equation. Q is anyway conserved whether you have an inviscid or a viscous flow. It's the mass flow, is the mass flux. Since you have a viscous flow, neither is R conserved nor is S conserved, unlike Benjamin and Lighthill. Okay. So R is the energy flux, S is the momentum flux. So these are all dissipated because of the presence of the wall. So Q is the only thing which is the same at every cross section in the flow. R and S would be expected to be things which decay with distance. Okay. And the basic idea was that can you generalize this equation with new definitions of R and S which take into account the fact that the velocity has a vertical variation in the velocity has a variation in the vertical direction, and so we generalized these definitions. So Q is very obvious. This is the generalization of S and R to a viscous flow. If you, for an inviscid flow, it would be a free slip wall. U would not be a function of y, and you would recover the Benjamin Lighthill expressions if you just substituted, if you just said that u is not a function of y. Okay. Now the interesting part was that when we did this analysis, remember the basic idea is that the roots of this cubic decide whether there are going to be undulations or not. Okay. So that is a very mathematical statement. I will try to make it slightly more precise physically. So now since it is a cubic, one can come up with a discriminant of the cubic. Okay. Just as we have a discriminant for a quadratic equation, you can come up with a discriminant of a cubic equation which tells you whether the cubic has 3 real roots or a single real root and 2 complex conjugates. Okay. So 3 real roots corresponds to, in this particular case for this nonlinear oscillatory problem, 3 real roots correspond to undulatory solutions. If you have 1 single real root, that corresponds to no undulations. Okay. So when we plotted, so this is the discriminant, and this small r small s is basically this capital R capital S non-dimensionalized with respect to some certain choice of scales. And now as I told you, this R and S is a function of streamwise distance because we have a viscous flow. So our discriminant is not a thing which is constant with space. This d becomes a function of space, and when we plugged this in, this is what we found. Okay. So this is a flow. So just look at the variation of Reynolds number. So this is a flow with Reynolds 250. You can barely make out any undulations here. As you keep decreasing the Reynolds, the undulations become more and more pronounced until you hit this point where they become unstable. There are undulations, they are getting taller and they are also getting unstable. Okay. The same information seems to be contained in this discriminant, the discriminant which says there are 3 real roots or 1. So for this particular case where there is no where there is almost no undulations, it corresponds to this green one, which is Reynolds 250. So you can see the D is negative and it remains below 0. The discriminant being below 0 is an indication that there is only one real root. For these two things where there are undulations, the discriminant starts with being 0 and then goes slightly above, okay, and for this one it goes much more than that, okay. So there is a remnant of inviscid theory as far as these waves are concerned, okay. So these seem to behave like inviscid nonlinear waves, and the basic picture that we have in mind is the following. I mean, we are trying to write down a mathematical model which tries to make this more precise, but the basic idea that we have is the following, that if you have a flow where there is a Reynolds number as a parameter and you can change it, we have seen that the Reynolds number makes, as you decrease the Reynolds number, you get more and more undulations and the undulations become taller, okay. So the basic idea is that as you decrease Reynolds number, the amount of the amount of difference between what is coming in and what is going out, the difference in energy also goes up. You can show this, okay. So as you decrease the Reynolds number, the difference between the incoming and the outgoing energies are going up. So there is some energy waiting to be released in the form of waves. These waves indeed get created, but as the amount of energy goes up by decreasing the Reynolds number, you also have to make your waves taller and taller to dissipate the increasing amounts of energy. Now as you are making your wave taller and taller, these waves start getting unstable, okay. So there is a certain critical height beyond which that wave is not stable and it starts toppling over, okay. So this is what is actually happening here, okay. So that is the basic analytical model that we are trying to project, and we no, you can also get it by varying the Froude number, okay. So the basic idea is so your energy difference between what is coming in and what is going out depends both on the Reynolds and the Froude number, okay. So if you play around with your Reynolds and Froude number, you can actually play around with the difference of what's coming in and what's going out. Now as you increase this difference, that difference has to go in creating these waves, but if the difference is more, you need to create waves which are taller and taller, okay. So the reason why you don't, I mean when you increase your Reynolds number, the reason why you stop getting these undulations is because there you reach a point beyond which it's impossible to create stable stationary waves because they are just unstable, okay. So then there is a different mechanism which kind of which get rid of the energy, okay. So that's the analytical model that we have in mind. And you said something about surface tension. So we have some very interesting results on surface tension in the other limit. This is all in the limit of Weber tending to infinity. So if you go to the other limit, you will actually find that you get undulations not only on this side, but you also get undulations on this side, okay. And we have some understanding of that as well. So it does not force the position of the jump. It has a small effect in the sense that, but if you chose an effect, if you chose an outlet length which is typically many integer times the steady, I mean for example, if you do the same simulation with an outlet which is going further and further, you would find that it has a exponentially decaying effect on this. Yeah, so if you look at the movie, you will find that the jump is formed much before the fluid knows that there is a bend, okay. So the bend is not the cause of the jump, but it has an effect on the location of the jump, okay. Okay, so I think I'll stop here, and we are continuing this work, so hopefully in the next time we will have some more analytical models to present with surface tension and things like that. I am not aware of that. Okay. I am aware of this analog picture, but I have not seen an analog of the undulations. The thing is, these undulations happen in very specific situations. For example, in the circular case, which we typically observe under a tap, you never ever see undulations. So until today, nobody has reported seeing an undulatory circular hydraulic jump. So you can argue about why that is so and things like that, but these undulations typically occur in planar geometries where you have a channel or you have an advancing bore and things like that. Yes, there are. So there are people who have done, there are people who have used very viscous liquids, and there are other kinds of interesting instabilities which occur and things like that. The interesting thing about this problem is you don't need to make it turbulent. There are enough mysteries in the laminar flow itself.
Hydraulic jumps with binary liquids?
Binary liquids, not that I am aware of. Okay.
So let's thank Rahul for coming.